Well, Sonic Prime Season 3. It exists. Thanks for watching. No, but really, what happened? I'm just gonna jump right into this because I really don't know how to explain just how much they fumbled this season, but I'm gonna try my best. This video will probably be pretty ranty, so be prepared for some of that. Please don't take any of what I'm gonna say in this video as mindless hate or try and say that I never liked Sonic Prime to begin with. One, because that's not true, and two, I literally have a video going over how I enjoyed Season 2 and was excited for Season 3. So even though I might be negative in this video, it's for a good reason. Immediately, this season picks up where Season 2 left off, which makes sense because it's a Netflix season, which aren't actually different seasons in a traditional sense, and are more like a single season split into 3 parts, in case anyone was wondering, which I doubt anyone actually was, but anyways. So this part picks right back up with 9 having all the Paradox Prism shards, and immediately stealing the reformed Paradox Prism because he's evil now. And oh, don't you worry, I have a lot to say about that, but I'll get there eventually. So he then begins his process of reforming the Grim World, while everyone else's worlds begin to fall apart despite the prism being whole again, because of reasons. So that's it then, right? 9 has the prism, Sonic and Shadow aren't able to just take it back from him because he controls reality now, and even if they wanted to, the prism should have just restored everything back to the way it was, right? Well see, that's where the show likes to introduce a little new thing called, no, you're wrong. See, this entire time, Sonic has actually had some of the Prism's energy stored up within him, which makes sense as to how he's been able to travel through different shatter spaces and such, and why 9 gave him those things that change his gloves and shoes. Yeah, I already forgot what those were called. They only exist to sell more toys anyways. But how does the tiny amount of energy that Sonic still has within him mean that an infinite source of energy can't work all of a sudden? It's like the writers realized just how easily 9 could have won straight away, so they had to introduce some new reason as to why Sonic was now super important to the plot. It's like saying the Chaos Emeralds can't be used anymore after Eggman uses them to power one of his machines, because now that machine contains part of the power, which means that an infinite source of energy is somehow useless if a tiny amount of it is missing. Sounds contrived, doesn't it? Well, trust me, it doesn't get much better after that. Sonic and Shadow then travel to the Grim to try and stop 9, which realistically should have either been super easy or straight up impossible given the supposed power Sonic and 9 both have, but it just ends up with Shadow falling into a hole and not showing up for the next 4 episodes, and Sonic being forced into New York. I think overall, this season more than others, really felt like it was being stretched out. I mean sure, some parts of season 1 and 2 might have dragged on for a little while, but at this point, they just needed to fill up the last few episodes with anything they could think of, which was not much. So after episode 1 proceeds to reset all of the progress that was made in season 2, Sonic does his typical Sonic stuff for the next 2 episodes and saves his friends, works with the Chaos Council a bit, and tries to avoid being captured by 9. And these episodes aren't all too bad, they feel like typical Sonic Prime shenanigans. And for the start of the season, I thought that maybe there could have been something interesting that this was all leading up to, but before I get into the worst part, I need to pause. Big pause. Like, rewinding pause. So if you'll remember back to season 2, the reason 9 is even evil here in the first place is because he wants to create his own world, separate from all the other shatter spaces, which is a good motivation for his character, and is genuinely something believable if you've seen the rest of the show. The issue with this motivation is that, when Sonic is about to give himself up to 9, he asks him to save everyone else, which 9 agrees to do. And I think they meant for this moment to be a heroic one for Sonic, you know, oh, how noble of him to sacrifice himself for everyone else. But like, isn't the whole point of 9 having the prism that he's going to make himself a world, and that's it? If he could have just saved everyone and given himself his own world, then what is everyone fighting over? A misunderstanding between Sonic and 9? And despite this, nobody ever brings it up? Oh, and spoiler alert for the very end, but they end up doing this anyways. 9 eventually agrees to restore everyone's worlds and keep them safe, and he gets to have his own world. What is the point of any of this conflict? It made sense before when it was one or the other, but if both sides get what they want in the end either way, then what are they all doing? In case you can't tell, I was under the impression that 9 getting the prism meant that he'll only be able to transform the Grim World into what he wants, which was the entire point of his villain arc. Because if anybody had thought about this for longer than a second, then they'd realize that none of this conflict ever should have existed in the first place. Sonic had shown multiple times in the past that he was willing to save everyone and make sure they all got their worlds back, despite what 9 says about him only wanting his world restored, So I'm sure if 9 really didn't trust Sonic, then I bet Sonic would have let him rebuild the Shatter Spaces and allow him to have his own world in the Grim, which, by the way, is what the end of Season 2 was going to result in. If you apply any logic to this show at all, it's clear that Season 3 shouldn't have even existed, and the show had everything it needed to wrap up in Season 2. But Netflix needed 3 seasons of the show because that's what they originally signed for when planning the show out. And I'm not entirely blaming Netflix alone for this. If the writers knew 3 seasons was the deal from the start, then I'm sure they could have added more stuff in here to allow for 3 seasons to work. But the way things turned out in the end, Season 3 was just completely pointless when you think about it. Season 2 should have ended with 9 reforming the prism like Sonic allowed him to do, then everyone's worlds would get restored, and 9 makes his own, and everyone lives happily ever after. And it just annoys me because that's essentially what we got in Season 3, except there's about 2 hours of time wasting in between it all. And don't even get me started by saying that this big battle sequence in episodes 4 through 6 was even remotely necessary or added to anyone's character at all. Oh, but the Roses got some cool moments, and Dredd wasn't depressed anymore, and the Chaos Council was working with— Stop, please, just stop. Why does any of that matter? The Roses already had cool moments in other episodes. Dredd was just a mess from the instant they sidelined his character, but he was already helping back in Season 2. And the Chaos Council? They're just a different problem entirely. I was beginning to tolerate and even enjoy some of their moments in Season 2, specifically with Mr. Dr. Eggman, but they went absolutely nowhere after that. Instead, we have an extremely drawn-out battle with the exact same fight sequence playing on loop for an hour straight. And don't get me wrong, the animation in the show is still really good and is genuinely the best part of it all, but that alone does not stop me from getting bored after seeing Rebel Rouge and Black Rose— I had to look up their names because I forgot— from punching the same 5 robots in slightly different ways 100 times in a row. And you can absolutely have a show or an arc that focuses entirely on one big battle and have it be really good. Look at Jujutsu Kaisen, which just wrapped up an 18-episode arc all focusing on a single battle, and it's considered one of the best parts in the entire series. Or Hunter x Hunter's Chimera Ant arc, spanning 60 episodes, 24 of which are devoted to a single battle. And I'm not trying to say Sonic Prime should have been nearly on the same level as either of those, but they're both examples of much longer battles than what happened in Sonic Prime Season 3, yet they're some of the best parts of both of those series. If you have good tension and provide good character moments, a big battle can be great to supplement those and heighten things up to 11. But that just isn't what they did at all in Sonic Prime. They try to come up with different plans that all fail to some degree, and halfway through, Shadow finally comes out of that hole that he was trapped in, and does almost nothing except somehow still be the best character in this entire show. I don't really feel like re-saying the exact same things that I did in my Season 2 video about Shadow, but he definitely still holds up, despite everything else falling apart around him. I've already talked about 9, and Sonic here is pretty much just a static character with an illusion of a character arc involving teamwork, so that's about it for the characters here. Nothing too great at all. After this extremely drawn out battle sequence finally comes to a close in episode 6, we get arguably some of the worst character writing from the show in episode 7. Sonic begins this episode talking to 9, saying the exact same things that he has all season, with neither still realizing how easily all of this could have been resolved, and then everyone else blasts into 9's base and he eventually gives up. He agrees to Sonic's plan of everyone getting what they want because he changed his mind? Why? Why now? Because he was beaten? Clearly not, because he said about 50 other times that his precious Paradox Prism was running out of power, and then proceeded to make hundreds of more robots, so he definitely could have just done that again, plus Sonic was right there for him to capture. But again, then we get into the problem of, why was 9 even evil at all if he was just going to restore everything in the first place? So the show has to make it seem like Sonic's words finally got through to him, so that it seems heroic and good now that 9 agrees to surrender. And then when Sonic is getting ready to sacrifice himself, everyone else asks how they can trust 9, justifiably so, considering he just tried to kill them all for the last 2 hours, and his response is, "Don't worry, you can trust me." What? Huh? That's it? I don't even know if I care enough to explain how stupid this is, so I'm just gonna do what the show does, and immediately move on to what happens next. 9 finally takes Sonic's stored up prism energy, and then uses it to restore everything back to normal. Yippee! Welcome to the end of Season 2. I mean Season 3. Yep, Sonic gets all ghosty, and so Shadow has to take him back to their world so he isn't anymore. And obviously Sonic isn't gonna die, so he gets back into their Green Hill world, and that's it. Also, mini side tangent, why does everyone refer to Sonic's world as just Green Hill? Surely Sonic's world isn't entirely Green Hill Zone, right? Or were they trying to do the early Archie Comics thing where different zones are different dimensions? Either way, it's just something weird that I noticed while watching the show. So once Sonic gets back, the scene from the very first episode plays out, except this time, Sonic has now learned about the power of teamwork, and uses that to defeat Eggman. Oh, and Shadow comes in to take the Paradox Prism before Eggman can, and takes it somewhere? Who knows, the show obviously doesn't care enough to explain what happens to it, so I don't either. The show then ends with Sonic and friends, relaxing on a beach, and then Eggman attacks again as usual, and that's it. That's Sonic Prime. The point of the show was to teach Sonic about the power of teamwork. Something that he has, literally, not once, ever had a problem with. I mean, come on, this show takes place at least after Sonic Advance 3, which was confirmed by Ian Flynn, which came out in 2004. And Sonic Heroes, the game all about teamwork, came out in 2003, which means that this Sonic has already experienced the real superpower of teamwork. Oh, also, seeing the reception of this season and the show as a whole, I doubt we'll be getting more of this, or these characters, anytime soon. And since the show wipes out everything in it that happened, I think it's pretty safe to say that this show, and especially this season, did not matter. I really wanted to like this season. I really did. I enjoyed Season 1 for the most part, and I thought Season 2 had some really great moments with Shadow and Prism Sonic, but Season 3 completely fumbled this show's ending, and it's unfortunately soured how I see it now. I still think there were a lot of great aspects. The animation, as I've said, is some of the best, most fluid Sonic animation that we've ever gotten, and I really enjoyed the fight scenes in a vacuum. The voice cast here was also pretty good. I still prefer most of the game voices, but I wouldn't mind this voice cast doing more Sonic stuff in the future. It just really sucks to see how the story and characters turned out in the end, because those were ultimately the most important things holding the show together. I'd say, if you were a fan of Sonic Prime Seasons 1 and 2, understanding Season 3 is something you could really just do by watching maybe half of the season, and even then, it won't really amount to much, since, at least in my opinion, none of it really mattered in the end. And that isn't to say that this show being entirely filler automatically makes it anything bad, but I'd say about 50% of it is things that I enjoyed, and 50% of it is things that I didn't, which is ultimately what leaves an unpleasant taste in my mouth. So if you enjoyed Season 3, more power to you. If you liked it for the animation and fights, then I can totally understand that. But it could have been better. And while I generally try to avoid giving numbered review scores to things, I think this one is pretty split down the middle for me, so Sonic Prime, 5 out of 10. Thanks for watching me rant about Sonic Prime. I didn't want Season 3 to turn out this way, but it is what it is, and I'm just gonna choose to ignore it in the future. I planned on doing a big review of the entire show, going over all 3 seasons, and I might sometime in the future, but I don't really want to anymore, so I guess I'll see if I feel like it later on. Other than that, be sure to drop a like on the video, and subscribe if you want to see more Sonic content from me in the future, and I'll see you next time.